critique of our government and our governmental policy, that there are countries where I might be taken off to prison, even tortured. So I'm not only very aware of the profound right that we have to say what we think, but at this point in our history, I think we need to remember that we also have a profound responsibility to say what we think. I'm running for president because I think some things need to be said. And the things that I believe need to be said are what everybody I know is saying. I believe that our politics itself is not a conduit for the energies that we need to be expressing in order to move to the next phase of our history. Our politics is stuck somewhere in the 20th century. Our hearts are in the 21st century. But our politics need to become more aligned with where we are as people. I don't see a problem with the American people. I think we're a good and decent people. I don't think we're any better than anybody in any other country. But we have a real problem on our hands, ladies and gentlemen, and that is that our politics is not currently aligned with our deep goodness. Tax policies which make it easier for rich people to get rich and harder for everybody else to even make it, that's not aligned with our goodness. Policies that stay in place so that millions of American children live with chronic trauma, so that millions of American children go to school every day in classrooms that don't even have the adequate school supplies with which to teach a child to read. And if a child cannot learn to read by the age of 8, and yes, those children are in Iowa too, if a child cannot learn to read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation is drastically decreased, and the chances of incarceration is drastically increased. All that our conventional political establishment has done is to normalize the despair of these children. That means, to that extent, our political establishment is not aligned with America's goodness. We have a national security agenda which is not based solely on our legitimate security needs, but also to the tunes of probably hundreds of billions of dollars above what our military says that they need. We spend our money and our resources on what President Eisenhower called our military-industrial complex, so that our national security agenda serves the short-term profits of defense contractors more than it serves efforts to proactively wage peace. Ladies and gentlemen, there are times in our history when the political status quo is not making it happen, and it's time for the people to step in. Yeah! The political establishment did not wake up one day and say, let's end slavery. No, with the abolitionist movement rising up, the people stepped in. And the political establishment did not wake up one day and say, let us give women the right to vote. That's not what happened. With the women's suffragette movement, people rose up and the people stepped in. The political establishment did not wake up one day and say, let's desegregate the American South. That's not what happened. With Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement, the people rose up and the people stepped in. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have issues that are just as serious as those. We don't have an evil institution such as slavery, an evil institution such as institutionalized suppression of women, or an evil institution such as segregation, but we have an amoral economic mindset that has corrupted our government, it has hijacked our value system, and it has put us in a place as a society where we put short-term profits for health insurance companies, gun manufacturers, big pharmaceutical companies, fossil fuel companies, and defense contractors before the health and well-being of the American people. You cannot look to the conventional political establishment to fix the problem. They are the problem. It is time for the people to step in. We were born of a rambunctious spirit. In 1776, we said to an aristocratic paradigm, which posited that only a few people were entitled. That's what was happening in Europe before the founding of this country. Only a few people were entitled to the land, and only a few people were entitled to education. Only a few people were entitled to wealth and wealth creation. With the founding of this country, we said no to that. And it is time to say no to that again. There is a rambunctiousness to the American spirit that we, the people, have not lost. The American people are who we've always been. I see it in new generations, young generations. I see it in all of us. The American people are not the problem. The problem is that the spirit of the American people is not represented by a political establishment that has been so corrupted by huge multinational, amoral economic forces that lead inevitably to immoral consequences. It is not the time for us to ask pretty please. We have been mentally trained to say pretty please for things that actually every American just should expect. We have rights and we have responsibilities. And I believe it is the responsibility of this generation to rise up the way other generations have risen up. Other generations had to say hell no to the King of England. Other generations had to say hell no to slavery. Other generations had to say hell no to the suppression of women. Other generations had to say hell no to institutionalized white supremacy in the American South. It is time for you and me to say very politely, very kindly, very stylistically, hell no. There are some things that must stop. And they're going to tell you that the only people qualified to make this happen are them, not the people. This is not a matter of not nice people. This is a matter of corrupt systems in this country, ladies and gentlemen. We need a fundamental pattern disruption of the political and social and economic status quo in the United States. Incremental change will not fix this, and only external changes will not fix this. Look what we're going through right now with these mass murders. Look what's happening. I'm a progressive Democrat, so of course I want strong gun safety legislation. I want universal background checks. I want the outlaw bump stocks. I want to close all the loopholes. I want to renew the ban on assault weapons, and I want to outlaw the manufacture of their bullets. But ladies and gentlemen, let us go deeper than that. That is a symptom. We can talk about mental health issues. Even that is a symptom. We can talk about health care. Even that is a symptom. The issue is not just how to get more mental health care. The issue is why so many people feel like they're going nuts in America today. What's happening? The issue is not just how to provide health care. The issue is why are so many Americans experiencing chronic illness at such higher rates than in other countries. And it all goes back to the same deep underlying cancers. And the cancer that underlies all the other cancers is the money in our politics. The reason so many of us are sick are because of our chemical policies, our food policies, our agricultural policies, our environmental policies, and even our economic policies, given how much stress they cause. That is why so many Americans are burdened by college loans. That is why so many Americans are experiencing daily chronic economic tension and anxiety. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not going to happen differently just because we elect politicians who say we want to make your pain less. I don't want to just say I can make your pain less. I want to challenge the underlying forces that make all that pain inevitable. But we have been trained. We have been trained to forget where the power lies. We have been turned into spectators. And in some ways, we, the American people, have allowed this to happen. And we have acquiesced with our own disempowerment. Donald Trump and the forces that he represents are like opportunistic infections. They couldn't have gotten hold of us the way they have had there not become a weakened societal immune system, and that's each and every one of us. None of this is going to change on a fundamental level unless there is a rising of consciousness among the American people. We must realize that citizenship has to be an issue, has to be a part of any well-lived life. Right now, the political establishment looks at the American voter like you're a poker chip. I want this many, I want this many, I want this many. You're not a poker chip. You are the power. The power was given to we the people. Is that radical? Oh, you betcha. Democracy is radical. Democracy is radical and love is radical. And when you have an economic system that has so corrupted our government and hijacked our moral value system to put short-term profits for corporations above the health and well-being of our children, the health and well-being of our earth, the health and well-being of people around the world, the health and well-being of the future, at what point is this pattern going to be interrupted? And at what point are we going to say that it's not going to be interrupted by the people? Or I don't want to make this about the people. You know, it's about corrupt systems. It's not about corrupt people. And that's important for us to realize, because there are many people who work within corrupt systems who don't even know how corrupt it is, and many of the people working within the corrupt systems are trying to fight it from within. This is not about fighting people, but it is about standing up to the part of ourselves that is cynical. Cynicism is just an excuse for not helping. That is whining or moaning. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're facing in our generation is no different than what other generations have faced. And that is systematic assaults on the pillars of democracy itself. We're not the first generation to have to deal with this stuff. Let's just not be the first generation to wimp out on doing what it takes to put this ship back on track. That is what I believe. Thank you. And that is why I am running for president, because I believe that leadership should be that which is holding the deepest conversation about the things that matter. I'm not interested in a top-down leadership paradigm that's stuck somewhere in the 20th century. To me, what a leader does is to hold the space for the brilliance of others. I'm not saying send me to Washington and I'll fight for you. I don't want to go to Washington and fight for you, but I want to go to Washington and co-create with you. Because what needs to happen in Washington also has to happen in Des Moines, also has to happen throughout the state of Iowa, and none of these things will change until you become the man you're capable of being, you become the woman that you're capable of being. All of us rise up in the way that generations before us have risen up. They didn't have a good chance of winning. What did the abolitionists have? There was no reason to think they could abolish slavery. What did the women's suffragettes have? There was no reason to think that they could get women's suffrage. What did the civil rights workers have? There was no reason to think that they could fight off the forces of institutionalized white supremacy. They stood up, they showed up, they rose to the occasion, and ladies and gentlemen, so can we. We have some serious problems in this country, and we've had serious problems in our past, but let us identify with the problem solvers. That is why when it comes to something like these mass shootings, I want more than serious gun legislation, which we must have. I want more than more mental health services, which we must have. I also want a United States Department of Peace, because I know that we must cultivate peace. You can't just fight violence. You have to cultivate peace. You can't just endlessly prepare for war. You have to cultivate peace. Darkness is the absence of light. We can't just fight hate. You have to cultivate love. And some of the changes have to happen inside us, and some of the changes have to happen on the level of policy. But none of that will happen on the fundamental level that things need to happen if we just have a better version of same old, same old. Donald Trump did not create all these problems. These problems created Donald Trump. And I am not prosecuting a case against Donald Trump. I am prosecuting a case against the system that produced him. If all we do is defeat Donald Trump in 2020, those same forces are going to be back in 22, and they're going to be back in 24. We need to interrupt on a way more powerful level. You know, there are people all over this world who roll their eyes at us, don't understand Americans, don't understand how we could let things happen like what happened this last weekend. People who think that Americans are so slow to awaken. And you know what? They're right about that. But I'll tell you something else. If you look historically, while it is true that sometimes Americans are slow to wake up, once we do wake up, we slam it like nobody's business. I'm running for president because it is time for this generation of Americans to slam it and kick ass. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, I'm told that I have time to ask some questions. Okay, yes.
So, sorry, let me just get my thoughts. I haven't been calling all day. I've been here since 7:30.
I'm sorry?
I've been here since 7:30, so I'm just getting caught. Okay. So, would you call for a mandate that requires all private businesses and all politicians to pay their interns at least $15 an hour? Because Representative Avery says experience does not pay the bills.
Well, I don't know about the intern issue, but I certainly want a $15 an hour minimum wage. And I certainly want to challenge anytime anybody says our economy is doing well. Our economy is not doing well. when you have 40% of all Americans who live with the daily chronic economic tension and anxiety, when you have millions of Americans wondering every single day what would happen if they got sick, what would happen if their children got sick, what would happen, how are they going to send their children to college, how are they going to pay their college loans. That issue that this lady is mentioning is part of a larger issue of systemic economic injustice, because we have now transitioned from a functioning democracy to a functioning oligarchy, corporatocracy. It's all an aristocratic system, and as I said before, we repudiated that in 1776, and it's time to repudiate it again. Yes. I see this lady asking about climate as a crisis. Yes, ma'am. Do you have a specific question, or do you want me to speak to that? We have the climate crisis is the greatest moral challenge of our generation. The debate is over. The moral equivocation of our political system has been the problem. The forces that have obstructed dealing with climate crisis have been wrong, and they are wrong today. We have 12 years. Some people say we have even less than that. We must sequester the carbon. We must reforest. We must develop alternative sources, sustainable sources of energy and of transportation. We must deal with the animal agriculture that produces so much of the nitrous oxide and the methane. We need regenerative agriculture. This is the thing, ladies and gentlemen. What I see in the area of the climate is the same thing I see in the area of helping our children, is the same thing that I see in the area of peace building, is the same thing that I see in the area of mental health and every other issue. We have the people. We have the experts. We have the geniuses. We have the best practices. But we fund the people who want to and know how to pave the way to the greatest era in American history. We fund them at a fraction of the cost that we spend to fund the actual forces that cause the problem. This is not something where we can just go to bed and get cozy with Boeing, go to bed and get cozy with oil and gas, go to bed and get cozy with Big Pharma, go to bed and get cozy with these processes. I read a tweet the other day that I thought was very interesting. It was from a European speaking about the United States, and he said, "I've never known a country to be so invested in protecting its abusers." When it comes to the climate, oil and gas, when it comes to fossil fuel forces, that for the sake of their own multi-billion dollars in profit, notice we actually gave $26 billion in subsidies to the fossil fuel companies last year. It is time, as I said, in this as in every other area, the people must step in now. Yes, sir. On what? I can't hear him. Reducing food waste. I think a lot of the things that we call food waste are actually things that could be transitioned into sustainable ways to actually help those who are hungry. We have in this country 43 million people who are considered food insecure, and a lot of them are children, some 13 to 15 million people. And the most interesting things that I hear about food waste today have to do with issues where food, what we consider food waste, does not have to be seen as waste, but could be seen as food products and food sources that actually could be transitioned. This is one of the things we have to do. You have to decide, we are going to end poverty in the United States. When was the last time a politician talked that way? It was Lyndon Johnson, to say we are going to end hunger in the United States. We are going to create a peaceful society in the United States. Then everything becomes different. All policy decisions become different, including food waste. America has too much food waste, where in other societies, what we consider food waste would actually be transformed into food that could feed people. Am I okay to continue? Yes, sir.
How can we best help you?
How you can best help me? I'll tell you how you can best help me. Wake up and realize that it is an intentional, strategized smear. When they tell you, I'm anti-medicine, I'm anti-science, I'm dangerous. I've heard that I'm dangerous. I've heard that I'm crazy. I've heard that I'm a grifter. Please know that there are powerful forces that do not want me to be in the third debate. They do not want me to be in the third debate. It's kind of interesting because just like President Trump looks at certain people from certain countries and say, you're not like us, you don't belong here. There are political forces in this country who say, you're not like us, you're not in our club, you don't belong here. In America, we don't do that. So what you can do is when they call you, when they tell you I'm a long shot, you might ask yourself, why'd I say that? When they say stuff about me, why don't you actually look into the truth and do your own investigation and see if it's true? And if you believe that my voice should be in this, now, that doesn't mean necessarily you know who you're going to caucus for, because you're going to have a lot of really good people to listen to. But if you believe that my voice matters and should be heard, then I hope you'll go to Marianne2020.com. I hope you'll give me whatever you're comfortable giving me. If you haven't already, please give at least $1 so I can get those donations up so that I can make that 13,000 I think I still need to get into the third debate. And shout it from the rooftops. And don't apologize for thinking I have something to say. Don't apologize for it. I need those numbers in the polls. What's wrong with having somebody who's not like them? You're right, I'm not like them, and I'm proud of it. Thank you very, very, very much. Thank you. Thank you.